Michael, thank you so much for those very generous comments. I also want to tell Michael that we here at George Washington look forward to working with your center as we advance this very important topic. And ladies and gentlemen, it is now my privilege to introduce the keynote speaker today. And this is an individual whom I've gotten to know in a very short period of time, but in that short period of time, I can tell you, you are in for a treat with regard to a speech today. He is a seasoned business executive with an outstanding track record of creating, growing, and harvesting business opportunities. His myriad of accomplishments include serving as founder, chairman, CEO, and sole shareholder of multiple companies spanning 5 continents and more than 50 countries. He is known publicly as the former president of General Dynamics CSCC, a leading-edge international communications and technology company that he founded and sold to General Dynamics Corporation. In addition to serving on numerous corporate boards, his less public endeavors include projects related to real estate, defense, education, energy, microfinance, and sports, media, and entertainment. He has a business degree from the University of Michigan, and he earned his law degree from the George Washington University. He indeed represents the very essence of GW's new FAME program and has much to share with us this morning about his topic, which is so timely, why lawyers make great entrepreneurs. And I will tell you, as I've spoken about legal education all over the country, really internationally, one of the things that I have emphasized in all of my audiences is that those who are legally trained do much to advance their democracies and also much to advance the business world. Here's an individual who symbolizes that. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the podium as our keynote speaker, Bill Poster.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Dean, and thank you, David Falk, wherever you are in the audience, for inviting me here today. There you are, David. Wow, what a great turnout. Great turnout. I'm really happy to be here today. And I'm happy to say that today, this very moment, where you're sitting, is the best time in history to be an entrepreneur. Let's look around. There seems to be chaos everywhere. We have economic issues. We have terrorism. We have political issues. We have global warming. The list goes on and on. But chaos creates opportunity. It creates the opportunity to solve problems. And guess what? Young lawyers are the best prepared, but most underutilized group of people, in my opinion, in this country who have not taken advantage of such opportunities. Let's think about it. There's that great film, people who are sports fans know, Any Given Sunday. Al Pacino, he's giving that great speech to his team at halftime. Grueling game. And he's talking to them, and he's telling them, gentlemen, there's inches everywhere on that football field. There's inches to be had everywhere on that football field. And you've got to grab them. They're there. They're not going to come to you. You've got to go out there and grab them. They're everywhere around you. And that's how I feel about young lawyers who are thinking of becoming entrepreneurs. They know so much. They think they know so much. They have to grab those opportunities. They're sprinkled all around their feet. So hopefully, today, thanks to the effort of David Falk and my alma mater, the law school, this effort and this conference will help law school students and young lawyers, and maybe even some older lawyers, take advantage of those opportunities. So, let's talk about young lawyers. Why are there so few young lawyers turned entrepreneurs? The eternal question. Lawyers are some of the best and brightest people in this country. You all know, if you're going to my alma mater, I'm biased, it's pretty tough to get into this law school. top 10, top 20, I'll say top 10 regardless. It's tough. You got to be smart. Right, Dean? Where's top 10, wherever the dean is. You've got to be smart to get in here, hardworking, disciplined, competitive, motivated, and confident. And guess what? Those are the exact attributes that make great entrepreneurs. So, with that said, I'm actually not aware of one person in my law school class that became an entrepreneur. Not one. Now, many of them have gone on to exalted positions as senior partners in major law firms, fabulous careers. Many have gone on to work for the government, fabulous careers. But not one that I'm aware of became an entrepreneur. Now, why is that? How can that possibly be? Well, let's think about it. You get into law school, if there are any law school students out there, and I'm sure there are, and you go and you read these cases. You read the cases, you look at the facts, you look at the law, you compare the law and the facts. You then recalculate based on what are the facts of your case. You're taught to dissect and analyze and rethink the narrative and reapply the facts. Those are perfect skills for entrepreneurs. But, there's always a but. But you're also taught to recognize all those things that could go wrong. And that might be one of the problems as I think it through. I mean, in the real world, a lot of people dread calling their lawyers. I dread calling my lawyers. Now, they're fabulous people. They give me fabulous advice. I couldn't get by without them. But I know when I get off that phone, there's going to be another 10 things on my to-do list for that day. And they're going to tell me all the things I missed. In fact, literally, last week, I had a dear friend of mine, baseball player, played on the championship Mets and played in the MLB for 16 years, came to town. He was trying to sell me on a new platform they developed. It's like an Xbox platform, but for sports gaming and animation. Fabulous product. We're out at lunch downtown here in Washington, and we're having a great time. The CEO of the startup excuses himself, comes back to the table. Something happened. I said, what happened? You were just so happy. He literally said, I just got off the phone with my lawyer. Literally. You can't make this up, right? You can't make this up. I actually wonder if all my entrepreneurial friends actually knew everything that could go wrong, if they would have moved forward or started at all. I mean, I believe in order to be a successful entrepreneur, you need a healthy understanding of how to work within the law, but you also need to be able to push up against the law. Look at Uber. Everybody knows Uber, right? Every day, Uber is moving forward like a great entrepreneurial company. But every day there's lawsuits. It's the taxi drivers. It's everybody's suing them. No matter what city or country they go into, they're pushing up against that wall. So, I propose today that being afraid to push the limits or the fear of risk is what prevents most lawyers from becoming entrepreneurs, assuming they do want to become entrepreneurs. I mean, let's face it, talking to the students now, you've got 4 years of undergrad, right? You've got 3 grueling years of law school. Pile on top of that your student debts. I mean, how can you not afford to take a great job, a great paying job at a big law firm if you've gotten the offer? You can't. Or a great US government job. I understand your fear. I've been there. I was broke. I had loans. I have been where you are. But honestly, in retrospect, you have to have faith, because when you leave law school, you do already have all those skills you need to become a great entrepreneur. So, with that said, now that I've pontificated long enough, like lawyers tend to do, with that said, I'd like to share with you some of the defining moments in my life that molded my life as an entrepreneur. Remember, I didn't know I was an entrepreneur while I was being an entrepreneur. It's only when you look back that you realize who you are. You have to get to a certain age to do that. So, there's going to be 3 defining moments. Defining moment number 1. I got out of this great law school, and believe it or not, I was with honors. I think that's top 10% of my class. I don't really know. I got some great jobs in New York. Weil Gotshal was a big firm, Breed Abbott and Morgan. Got all these great offers, but I ended up taking a job here in town in DC with a medium-sized firm that was very entrepreneurial, did a lot of corporate, tax, real estate work, and they said they were going to throw me right in. And they did. They threw me right in. I mean, day one, write a partnership agreement. I don't know how to write a partnership agreement. Write a deed of trust. I don't know how to write a deed of trust. Well, I learned fast. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, 7 days a week, I learned fast. And after only about 3 months, I was writing deeds of trust in my sleep. I was getting boring. I was starting to bore myself. And I started getting a little bit uncomfortable with this. Is this the right thing for me? So I was very close with my father at the time. He lived in New York, and he would call me every day, call his son every day to say hello. And every day, I guess, I was complaining to him how miserable I was. Dad, I'm unhappy. I don't like this. And one day, my father never raised his voice ever to me. Ever, thank goodness. He put up with me all those years. Never raised his voice once to me. He goes, Bill, look down at your hands. I said, Dad, what are you talking about? He said, Bill, look down at your hands. I said, fine, Dad, I'm looking down at my hands. He said, are they tied to that desk? No, Dad, they're not tied to that desk. He said, then shut the heck up and do something about it, but I'm tired of hearing it. First time he had ever raised his voice to me in my life. I said, geez, my father's raising my voice to me. I must really be getting bad. Well, that was the call to arms, the call to action, whatever it is that you want to call it. That was the wake-up call. So I go out. I start going out as much as I can. I'm looking in the newspapers for opportunities. I'm panicked. I just graduated law school. I had my whole future in front of me. I was going to be a great lawyer, a partner in a firm. I had my whole future before me, and now that was no more. No more. And I went out. I started looking for a new job. I found 3 fellas here in town, older fellas, that decided they were going to merge their 3 real estate companies. And they were looking for a new president of that company. So I went and I interviewed, and the fact of the matter is I was not qualified. I mean, I just had God knows how many months as a real estate lawyer. There were very, very many more people more qualified than I was. And as it turned out, miraculously, they made me an offer for the job. Like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm taking this job. And I asked them, why did you pick me? And they said, because you're a lawyer. Because you're a lawyer. You can learn the other stuff, but everybody else we were going to hire, we'd have to have an outside law firm, and we want you. Life is good, okay? All of a sudden, life's good. I am making $100,000 a year, which was, gosh, almost literally 3 times what I was making at the law firm, more money than I was worth. They gave me a 15% carried interest. You don't know what a carried interest is. In every deal they did, and an expense account. I was in heaven. This was it. I was the smartest guy in the world. I went to law school, and I landed on my feet. Life's good. Boom. Real estate market crashes. Crashes. I mean, one day I'm on top of the world, and the next day I'm walking into the office, and there is nothing to do. I didn't get fired. There was nothing to do. People were handing the keys back for buildings. We never filed bankruptcy. We never defaulted on a loan, but we handed back a lot of keys. And I wake up about a week later in my apartment, defining moment number 2 in my life. I kid you not, I walk into the bathroom and I look into the mirror. And I just start laughing, sort of hysterically laughing. And I look in the mirror and I say, if you're so smart, how is it possible that you're standing here broke with absolutely no prospects? No prospects at all. Well, that was really the real call to arms. I, at that point, said, geez, you can't just sit here. You've got to do something with your life. Okay, now remember, all you lawyers out there who are going to law school, every one of my law school classmates is now looking at me saying, see, Look what happened to him. He should have stayed in the law firm. We're all getting paid, we're all employed, and he is unemployed with no prospects. And here starts the journey, defining moment number 2. I go out there and I start going to parties. I have to meet somebody, I have to find something to do, right? First party I go to, a friend of mine, his brother. Okay, remember, I'm broke now. He starts bragging to me, literally. Well, I'm working with Lloyd's of London, which is a big insurance outfit. I'm doing this and I'm doing that with Lloyd's. And he's going on, and I'd say, you know, when I was practicing law, there was a big problem with environmental risk and hazardous cleanup. And banks that were taking back land were worried that they'd have to clean up the environmental hazardous waste on the property, and they didn't want to take it back. Maybe we can do something. And in fact, we went out and we got it underwritten with Lloyd's, and he gave me a little money. Remember, I was broke. And he's sending me around the country selling his insurance policy. I wasn't getting a salary. Okay, so I think I found it now. I'm going to come out of this smelling good. I'm going to make millions of dollars selling insurance. About the same time, of course, I'm calling other people around town. Now, what's really funny is, before, there's a restaurant about a half a block from this law school. I think it's called Founding Farmers. Before that restaurant was there was a very, very famous restaurant called Dominique's. Fabulous restaurant. It was the hottest restaurant in town at the time. And I used to take my dates there. I could afford a drink. Drinks were $7, which is still a lot of money. And 2 drinks for $14. And they only had 4 seats at the back bar. I used to take them there and impress them. And, well, I took one of my dates there, and we're sitting there, and there were 2 other seats filled by a very tall gentleman with his date. And the women had excused themselves, and I started talking to him, and the next thing I know, we're having dinner. And he's ordering Grand Marnier soufflés in advance, vanilla soufflés, which already were going to cost 10 times what I had in my pocket. So we ended up having dinner that night. I reached for the check. He reached for it, put a little pressure on it. I pulled my hand away. He paid the bill. It was either that or the exit in the back of the restaurant. And we maintained a friendship. But he mentioned something about he ran a big multinational company. I didn't care. It was my first year of law school. It meant nothing to me. Anyway, so to come back to the story, I'm selling that insurance. I call this fellow up. He is the CEO, it turns out, of a major multinational company up in Michigan. And I call him up. And, you know, people have called me different names throughout my whole life. He'd never called me Bill. He's from Oklahoma. He called me Poster. Poster. It's always Poster. And I call him up. He says, Poster, how you doing? I said, not very well. He said, what's the problem? I said, well, I'm broke. I'm unemployed. Can you help me out? What's going on? He goes, help you out, huh? Well, all right. We've got a plane. They had a fleet of planes, 13 planes. I remember exactly how many planes. We've got a fleet of planes, and I know one is coming to Washington this week to pick up some ambassador. I want you on that plane. Come up here and talk to me. I had never been on a private plane before. I was excited just to get on a private plane. I get on the private plane, a lot of important people. I'm sitting in the worst seat in the plane, somewhere in the back on the bench. There were seats and a bench. I was on the bench. And I go up to Michigan, and they whisk me off to headquarters, and I walk into his big office, huge office, half the size of this room. It was a huge office. And it's like, Poster, good to see you. Sit down. You got 5 minutes. I'm like, wait, you're my buddy. We're supposed to be hanging out and talking. I got things to do today. Tell me what's on your mind. Well, I'm broke. I'm unemployed. I need some help. And he goes, well, what do you do? What are you good at? Well, other than drinking, right? What are you good at? I said, well, I'm a lawyer, and I know real estate. He goes, okay. Just like that. He says, all right. Well, we're expanding into Central Europe and Eastern Europe, and we need some warehouses. All right, I'm going to give you a contract. You go get those warehouses. You better do a good job. If you don't do a good job, you're going to be fired. And thanks. There's a plane leaving here tomorrow. I got stuff to do. Goodbye. Just like that. Just like that. A week later, I'm on an airplane to Warsaw, Poland. Warsaw, Poland. The wall hadn't come down. It was coming down. I didn't even know about the wall, the Berlin Wall. It didn't even matter to me. I had a job. And I was going to get paid. So I went to Warsaw, Poland, and I put together some warehouses, distribution facilities, big warehouses. And I ended up, it wasn't that bad. I actually knew what I was doing. I was a lawyer, remember? I had some real estate experience. I had the motivation. I ended up putting warehouses together for this huge multinational in Poland, Czechoslovakia. It was Czechoslovakia then. Now it's the Czech Republic and Slovenia, and Hungary. And I called him up just to check and say, how did I do? How did I do? Well, poster, my people tell me you did a really good job. I said, good. He goes, well, okay, well, thanks. I said, no. What else can I do for you? What else can I possibly do for you? I need the money. I'll do anything. Entrepreneurs will do anything to move ahead. So he goes, well, we got a problem. We've got a problem. The problem is, and this is back then, if we produce these goods here in Michigan, we've then got to load them on ships, send them down the St. Lawrence Seaway, across the Atlantic Ocean, unload them on ports, put them on trucks. And back in those days, you never knew if the trucks were going to get to Poland or Czechoslovakia. Somehow things just disappeared along the way. And I said, really? All right, well, let me try to figure that out. I come home. I know nothing about communications. I know nothing about logistics. I know nothing about how to move goods around the globe. I start calling around to total strangers, to engineers, to find out, how can we solve this problem? Well, it turns out we came up with a great solution. Back then, remember, there was no internet, right? No internet back then. No cables, no fiber. And we designed a VSAT system. VSAT stands for Very Small Aperture Terminal Satellite Dish. They're about 18 inches. And we put little VSATs all over the place, all over Eastern Europe. And it was a fabulous design. And it turned out it worked. He was very happy. It's funny. The whole time I was in Eastern Europe, you get that feeling sometimes somebody's looking at you all the time. I didn't really know. I was quite naive. Even though I grew up in New York City, I was still naive. And I come back home. I get a phone call from a defense contractor. And they said, we'd like to talk to you. And I said, sure, talk to anybody. Do you have any cash? I'll talk to you. And as it turns out, they said, we heard about your design, and they gave me, you'll always remember your very first contract. They gave me an $81,000 contract to come up with a design for a system to move information around the globe, like perhaps I was doing for this multinational. So I came up with that design. They liked it. They gave me another subcontract. They said, well, we want you to add this capability onto it. We want near real-time communications. Back then, again, remember, there was no real-time communications. Near real-time was the best you could do using a satellite, a very expensive satellite. And they wanted all this functionality. And I started saying, whatever they asked me for, I said yes, yes, yes. And 3 years later, in just 3 short years, me and my people designed a system that turned out, and it's still in use today, to be the foremost state-of-the-art system for sharing information around the world for such things as humanitarian relief, peacekeeping, telemedicine, joint operations. Anytime countries, not just one country, anytime countries need to work together and have a multi-level access security system, they use that system. So it turned out to be fabulous. I'm on my way now. This company's doing well. I never sold one insurance policy for that insurance that we talked about earlier, not one. Well, this company ended up doing quite well, and it moved on, and I then worked with, it was Senator John Warner from Virginia, and that company, I was still the sole shareholder, won the Partnership for Peace contract, which was to expand into the former Soviet republics, and then we moved on, and eventually we're working in over 50 countries around the world. And that was great. But now even for me, this company was getting a little big, so I put it up for sale in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I sold that company. Life's good again. Life's good again. Defining moment number 3. What to do with the rest of my life. I had just sold the company. I was still in my 30s, still relatively young. I had now had a boatload of money, right? And a lot of new friends. Amazing how many new friends you have. And I take a step back. Now I'm looking in the mirror, and I'm not looking in the mirror saying how dumb you are. I'm congratulating myself, okay, at least it worked out okay. But I realized at that point in my life that being an entrepreneur is a way of life. I loved starting new businesses. I love creating value. It makes me feel good to create something from nothing. I love learning new things every day. I don't care if I don't know anything about a topic. Everyone in this room, the best and the brightest, in a few days, in 3 days, you can become an expert on a topic, given the rapid technological advances that are made every day. It's always new. And I love, guess what? I love picking up the phone and meeting new people and talking to new people, even strangers. So, as fate would have it, right about that time, we're talking the early 2000s, the dot-com crash had just happened. Some of you may remember, most of you probably not, especially if you're students. It was brutal. I had one friend who started a company just like I did, owned 2 million shares of his own company, and the stock was trading at $41. It was worth $82 million. He got rid of his wife. He just did all the wrong things. They were going to do an IPO, 6 months. There's a lockup period, as many of you know, in IPOs. By the time they did that IPO, the stock was zero. His wife was the only one who made out in the divorce. She got the money. I kid you not. She got the money, he got the stock. Good for her. It was absolutely brutal, okay? So, what to do with the rest of my life at this point, right? So, let's talk about friend number one. Remember, I have all these new friends. Friend number one comes up, calls me up. She says, listen, you know, the real estate's bad. Banks are taking back all this real estate. I know it. We can buy a $10 million mortgage for, I don't know what we can buy it for, but it's for sale. The bank wants to sell it. So we end up buying, I think it was a $10 million mortgage for pennies on the dollar. Pennies on the dollar. I said, wow, this is great. I'm sure the bank made some money too. Everybody was happy. The economy was in absolute shambles. And we did that deal, and it was kind of nice. Of course, he was a real estate guy. He found somebody who had money. I got a call just a few weeks later. I found another deal. And he said, I found this huge piece of property outside of Washington, D.C., over 100 acres. It's a great deal. Let's go look at it. And we went and looked at it, and you know what? He was right. It was a great piece of property. So we put together a contract, and we put it in, and we hear back a few days later that we didn't get the deal. Our bid wasn't the highest. And it was August. I remember this very well. It was August. I said, I need some time off, and I took August off. September comes, Labor Day comes, everyone back to school. I get a phone call from my partner, and he said, boy, am I glad we didn't buy that property. I said, why? He goes, it's contaminated. It has hazardous waste everywhere. They're fighting that the seller didn't tell the buyer, and the seller should have told the buyer, and there's reps and warranties. For those of you who are practicing law, you know how that goes. I said, contaminated. He said, yeah, aren't we glad we didn't buy that? I said, you know, opportunity, environmental indemnity insurance. We bought the property, and we bought an environmental indemnity policy, like I mentioned earlier, that only if I had practiced law I would have known about, to quantify the risk of buying that property and cleaning up that environmental waste. And that turned out to be a great deal, still going on 15 years later. Fabulous real estate deal. Never would have done that had I not been a lawyer, had I not had the training, had I not understood the law and business and how all that worked. Okay, friend number two. Time for friend number two. The phone's ringing, right? They still think the cash register's open. So we have friend number two, and he comes to me, and we'll all make this mistake in life. You have a friend, you don't really like what he's proposing, but he's been a good friend, and you just want to help somebody. Sometimes you just feel the need to help somebody because that's the right thing to do. So he said, I want to start a clothing company. And he asked me for some money. I gave him some money. I knew it was a mistake. And of course, 30 days later, he comes back. And I said, how are things going? Thinking he needs more money, right? He said, well, they're going okay, but we don't have a brand. You're going to be talking about branding later today in this symposium. We don't have a brand. I need a spokesperson. I need somebody to wear these clothes so somebody's going to pay attention. I said, I don't know any celebrities. I don't know any famous people. But like a good entrepreneur, I'm going to get on the phone and I'm going to call everybody that I know and see if I can't find somebody. So I'm calling everybody, and everyone I talk to, no matter what we're talking about, I say, do you know anybody? Do you know anybody? Do you know anybody? One fella, who I didn't really know that well, says to me, well, you know, I'm coming into Washington, and I've got to head up to Baltimore to meet with a football player, and I know he's always looking for things to do. Maybe after he retires, he wants to figure out what to do with the rest of his life. So I said, can I come? And he says, of course. So he flies into town. I don't even know who I'm going to see. He flies into town. We drive up to Baltimore, pull into this big house. I come into this house. I remember this very well. It was 11:45 in the morning, and we pull in, and I come in the side door, not the front door, the side door. They take me in, and it's now 11:55. Somebody walks over to me and says, you got 5 minutes, and then he's going to lunch, so make your pitch. I walk into the room. Big guy sitting down, bigger guy behind him. I say, hi, my name's Bill Poster. He says, hello, my name's Ray Lewis. I'm a football player. I said, how do you do, Mr. Lewis? And this big guy behind him didn't introduce himself. I start talking to Ray. I had heard of Ray, but I didn't know Ray. I was a Redskins fan. I don't really care about Ray. And we talk, and we're talking 5 minutes, 15 minutes, and the guy standing behind Ray is staring me down. I mean, I'm trying to pay respect to Ray, because you don't want to disrespect Ray, and I've got the other guy staring down at me like, finish it up, move it forward. And it turned out Ray and I spoke for an hour. The guy standing behind Ray, he disappeared. I only found out later that it was another very famous football player who was supposed to have lunch with Ray at 12 and was mad at me because I was interfering with his lunch. So, Ray and I had a great talk, and we ended up doing quite a few things together. We worked on many, many deals together, and as a result of that, some people heard that we're working on things together. I get a call from California from that same baseball player friend that I mentioned earlier. He said, you know, I have a friend who's an actor, and I've been telling him about what you've been doing and the opportunities you've created, and he wants to talk to you, and he wouldn't mind meeting Ray too. Next thing I know, we fly out to California, and I'm sitting there. We're pulling up to this house in one of the nice exclusive neighborhoods, first gate, second gate, third gate, security guards. I mean, you know, I'm like, this isn't the president. I know it's not the president. And we walk in, and there sits Charlie Sheen, the actor. Charlie. Okay, here I am sitting with Charlie. Got Ray. And contrary to what I read in the papers, he turned out to be very intelligent, very, very intelligent, very entertaining, a great host. And we got along famously. And we started doing some things together. I started getting involved in the entertainment with him. He invited me to the set of Anger Management, which was the follow-up to 2.5 Men. And we started moving forward together. And that worked out quite well. A lot of the stories, obviously, I can't tell you because Charlie's involved. Clearly one of the most memorable periods in my life, and not too long ago. So that's going along well. And you know, the grapevine is a wonderful thing. Next thing I know, I get a call from a media executive in New York and says, I hear what you did with Ray, I hear what you did with Charlie, and I'd like you to come to New York and meet with me. And I said, well, okay, why don't you come down to Washington? He said, no, New York, Washington. You'll all find out that everybody wants you to come to them. So after 15 back and forth, New York, Washington, I ended up going to New York, of course. And that's what entrepreneurs do. Doesn't matter how big, how wealthy, how important you think you are the catalyst, you are the motivator, and you've got to go make it happen. So I go up to New York, I sit down with him. And he's deciding now what to do with the rest of his life. He has a contract that may or may not be coming up. He doesn't know whether to renew. He's a very well-known person. And we start talking, and he explains to me how the entire media industry is now being revised. You all know Netflix, right, makes their own productions now. Amazon's making their own productions. Everybody's making their own movies. The whole dynamic and the whole paradigm for doing business in Hollywood, for making TV series and movies, is being turned upside down. I can go into more detail, but there's not time. Take my word, everyone's panicking a little bit because the entrepreneurial spirit is being taken out of creating your own product and then selling it to a network. The networks, like Netflix, they pay for their own productions now and they own it. So he's telling me all this, and I said, all right, what do you want me to do? You're obviously I don't know anything about media. He goes, well, think about it. And I gave him some thoughts on life, and we parted ways. And I went home again, just like I did last time I left Michigan. And I sat down and I started, remember, it's a lot easier when you don't know anything about an industry. Believe it or not, it's a lot easier to design a new paradigm for doing business in that industry because you're not stuck in the old ways. You don't say to yourself, oh, that can't work because of so-and-so, or that can't work. And I didn't know anything about media. So I put together a new paradigm. And I called him up, and we started talking about it, and I sent it to him, and he goes, geez, can you really make this happen? Well, of course I'm going to say yes, right? Overconfidence is par for the course with entrepreneurs. And I said, yeah, I think I can make this happen. Well, if you can make this happen, I'm all in. And you know what? I went out, I found extraordinary amounts of financing overseas. I'm talking in the hundreds of millions of dollars. They love the model. Remember, the whole world's changing now. People want to buy content. They want to own content. They may not want to own studios. They may want to own studios or television stations. Content is king. Wow. I'm now looking at, this is later on, putting together what might be the largest deal of my life. I'm working on this thing night and day. When you do business with Asia, you're up at all hours. 9-hour difference, 10-hour difference. I'm up all night in bed taking phone calls, going back to sleep, taking phone calls. 6 to 8 months of excruciating work, working with the lawyers who in this deal actually did a fabulous job, a lot of international tax issues, so on and so forth. And you will find out as entrepreneurs, as you get on in life, that sometimes the ball gets fumbled on the 1-yard line for absolutely no logical reason. Egos get involved, personalities get involved, families get involved. And in fact, this deal, which absolutely unequivocally should have happened if we were following a linear, logical path, fell apart at the last minute. Now, I wasn't devastated like I was when the real estate industry collapsed, but I was pretty darn disappointed. I was exhausted with all the time zones, and I said to myself, you know, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do this anymore. And all my friends said, yeah, that'll last about 24 hours. And in fact, it only lasted about a week because if you're out there as an entrepreneur and you're pushing forward and using your skills, people hear things. You know, people like to talk. People always talk. People want to hear what's going on. And I start getting phone calls from actors, actresses, writers, producers, production companies saying, hey, you know, we heard that there was a great deal put together. We heard it probably wasn't your fault. And we'd like to talk about that. So I fly out to California, and I start meeting with all these people, and there were a lot of people that were very interested. As the world is today, as you all know, as you all sit here right now, at the same time, interest rates are at historic lows, right? I'm switching gears a little bit. Interest rates are at historic lows, and people all over the world are looking for places to put their money. Obviously, you cannot put your money in CDs anymore, right? You can only put so much money in the stock market before it crashes and then goes back up and down and up and down, you know, if you want to sleep at night. So there's a lot of these foreign entities, whether they be governments or individuals or sovereign wealth funds, my friends are all telling me, that are looking for places to invest that'll give them a decent return. And they mostly like AAA real estate, but they're willing to consider alternative investments. And you know, content is pretty hot right now. A lot of countries around the world always envied Hollywood. It is one of our biggest exports, right? The entertainment business. So in fact, people say, okay, Bill, what are you doing today? I have to be honest with you, I have never been happier. I am working on media deals and content deals, and they're all moving forward. And it looks like by the end of the year that I'm going to have the next phase of my life, hopefully defining moment number 4, which hasn't come here yet. So with that said, I'm really not going to go into it. There's not a lot of time, but I had other ventures drilling for oil and gas down in the Barnett Shale in Texas, which I started in 2004, and I'm still doing micro-lending, if you can believe it or not, here and in Russia. I made, as David and I have discussed, I made an offer for the Oakland Raiders to Al Davis right before he passed away. We were very close families. He grew up in New York. Almost made that happen, even with Al. For those of you who are sports fans, making a deal with Al Davis is very difficult. Was not able to do that. The team was passed on to his son. I've done deals with Indian tribes. I've even started a great company with the late Bill Seidman, who some of you may or may not know was the head of the FDIC and then the first director of the Resolution Trust Corporation back when we had a savings and loan crisis. With all that said, the real point that I want to make here today is that there are opportunities everywhere for lawyers, law students, young lawyers, old lawyers who do not want a traditional legal career. If you think about what's going on in the world today, and I saw some of these topics on the agenda for this symposium, there's sports betting, there's Bitcoin, there's sports-related gaming, there's the cannabis industry, there's these incredible new high-tech sports stadiums, which is a real estate deal, Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys. Sports teams now, it's almost like it's not even the sports team, it's a whole real estate deal. There's even Pokemon hotspots, which I really have no idea what they are. But the bottom line is that technology and the world are rapidly evolving every day. If you don't know an industry, do not let that stop you. It certainly didn't stop me. And you, thanks, I think, to this law school and the program that David is implementing at this law school, will be much, much, much better prepared than David and I ever were to become entrepreneurs. So, don't forget, embrace the fear. The key is to embrace the fear. And like my father said, your hands are not tied to that desk. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me today.
We're going to sit.
Okay.
So we can take questions.
Where would you like to sit?
Right here. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give Bill Poster another round of applause for that wonderful conversation. And I have to say, Bill, when you say embrace the fear, I often have to do that as dean of the law school. And I'm so glad that you are here. I wanted to also mention to many of you, this is being recorded because many of our students are in class. We always tell them they have to go to class in order to learn very well. So we're recording this and they will have the opportunity to see it. So, and I am very, very grateful for that. We have time now to entertain questions from the audience. And I've been asked to sort of be the moderator of those questions. And so if you have a question, is there a microphone for them to come up to? Do you? Okay, there's a mic there. So if you'd raise your hand, if you have a question, please, the microphone will come forward and we'll field those questions. Is that?
What is your favorite industry that you've invested in, and is there any industry that you haven't invested in that you want to explore?
Good question. And I'm going to flip it around on you a little bit. It's not always what industry I want to invest in, but frankly, as an entrepreneur and a businessman, it's what industry is most likely to succeed that I have an interest in. You obviously don't want to invest in things that are not the latest trend or that are not trending upward. So right now, as I mentioned earlier, media content around the world is very, very important. If you read the newspapers, you will see that China is spending billions of dollars procuring U.S. production companies and film rights. And there's going to be, I believe, a land grab, not just in Asia, but in the Middle East and other parts of the world, to begin to develop their own content. They don't just want our content anymore. They don't just want Hollywood's content anymore. So I think that's an area that I think has a very bright future and can be, it's not going to be homogeneous in the future. For example, there will be content developed for Asia. There'll be separate content developed for the Middle East. And I think that has a great future. So that's what I'm focusing on now.
That's a wonderful question. And Bill, I'd like to follow that up a little bit and tie it into a point that you made earlier about taking risks. This is one of the things that I always tell students. Everybody who's a student, raise your hand out there. They're my students. Wonderful. And I've always told students that you do have to take risks. But this is the kind of, a law degree and a law training gives you a variety of different skill sets in order to be able to do that. But as an entrepreneur, and as you have done, I've always told students, you've got to be on the front line to create your opportunity. What kinds of advice would you give to them in that line? How do you create your opportunities? How do you go out there and discover, here's something that I can grab onto and use my talents to create?
Very good question, a complicated question and a multifaceted question. The first thing begins with knowledge. I love to read, and as a law student, you already do too much reading, I know that, but you do know how to read, and you do know how to read well. And I think you first have to have an understanding of what's going on in the world today. So when people say, oh, you have to read the papers or be up with the news, you do. You do have to stay constantly informed on a variety of topics, even topics that you might not think you're interested in. And then you take that knowledge, if you're an entrepreneur and you have the desire, you take that knowledge, and when you're out and about in the world, you will see opportunities. I mentioned that Al Pacino halftime speech, and it's almost worth watching on YouTube. You will see those opportunities based on the knowledge that you have, and therein lies the opportunity, is to combine what you've read about, what you see happening, what you're interested in, and who you know that might be able to help you in those areas. So it's a multifaceted approach that takes a passion. It takes a passion.
And along that line, and this is what I tell students so often, don't be afraid of no. So very often, as you say, you see an opportunity out there and you say, well, you know, this really excites me. I really want to do this. And I know somebody that I think could be interesting in terms of doing this, but I may be a little bit afraid because they may say no. And I tell students, so they may say no. There are other individuals out there that you might go.
Right, and a tiny bit of a controversial statement I'll make right now, which is you shouldn't even go to that person unless you have something interesting to offer them. Because a lot of people, I guess I could talk about myself, a lot of people come to me and say, I have an idea. I say, well, 2 a.m. in the morning in bars across D.C., everybody has ideas, right? Everybody's going to conquer the world at 3 in the morning on the way home. Everybody has ideas. But if you're walking up to somebody and you're going to run an idea by them, and they may be somebody that you want to work with or have finance your idea, it has to be more than that. You have to tell them, I have an idea, and here's what I want to do, and here's how we're going to do it. And that will get them interested. Nobody, honestly, is interested in hearing your ideas.
So you got to be prepared.
You got to be prepared. Absolutely.
Right.
I'm sorry, not to interrupt you. 2 steps more than you think you have to be prepared. That's how many steps
you have to take. Great. Yeah. Other questions? And as you raise your hand, please, the people with the microphone, take it over to them.
I got it already. So, you have a sense of the future. It sounds like you're a mad risk taker. Apply those skills to law schools today. What should be in the law school curriculum? What's the future of law school from your perspective?
Well, as usual, I'm going to turn that around on you. I would say the opposite. I may appear to be a mad risk taker. However, based on my law education, I will tell you that I quantify every risk before I walk out of the room. In fact, I am the most neurotic person in the room every time we're closing a deal. Because all my partners in the room don't understand that the representation of warranty that they just made may come back to be a lawsuit in 3 months. I mean, I already am walking out of that closing room at the end of a transaction thinking, oh my gosh, I wish he hadn't said that. Did we really represent this? No one else in the room is worrying about those problems. They're going to celebrate. So my law school education allows me in advance to know the problems I'm going to have. And it has served. Here's another very important point, Dean, as an entrepreneur. It's really not how much money you make, it's how much money you don't lose. Because as an entrepreneur, you will try many, many times to proceed with great ideas, and they may not work out. And you will end up spending money on lawyers, on research, on travel. And you have to keep those expenses to a minimum in order to find that 1 out of every 10 visions that you have that's actually going to work. Just like my environmental indemnity insurance, I was certain. The only one who ever bought it was me. So I hope that answers your question.
And to piggyback on that just a little bit, the way you answer that question, Bill, sort of sounds as if you take calculated risks. So in other words, there are risks out there that you need to take in order to become an entrepreneur, but you calculate
And
them.
quantify them in terms of dollars.
Yeah. And so can you talk about that a little bit in terms of how would, if a student or someone looks in the newspaper and boom, something
Well,
occurs
that's a great
to them.
question, and this is very important for lawyers. You know, good lawyers are worth whatever you have to pay them. Trust me. Some days, these days, you're paying $1,100 an hour for a lawyer. But there's a reason that people pay $1,100 an hour. Some of the fellas and the women who you pay that money, they are worth it, trust me. However, you could go broke paying those kind of fees. Anyone can. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are. So as a lawyer, believe it or not, I don't use lawyers at the beginning of transactions. I will draft all my own contracts. They're not perfect, I understand that. I'll put in all clauses like notwithstanding anything to the contrary, you know, to the best of my knowledge. You'll all become familiar with these phrases. But I'll do all my work, my licensing agreements, and I know the IP lawyers out there are saying, no, don't say that. But initially, you have to do your own legal work in order to make certain that the people you're talking to are actually going to move forward with you.
Sure.
Because everybody likes to talk, right? And you'll make a proposal to somebody and say, well, if you can do that, I'm all in. People don't like to say no.
That's right.
And so coming back to the law school, you can do a lot of your own legal work. And then when you truly believe the deal is moving forward, you do have to find good counsel.
And to the gentleman who asked about the curriculum at law schools, I think I can piggyback on Bill's commentary to say there are a rich array of courses now being offered that really get at the heart of the more global economy that we're in right now. And at a school such as George Washington, where we're in the district and we have over 200 individuals who teach as adjuncts in a variety of fields, there's a lot of rich curriculum opportunities for our students. Another question.
I just want to add to the one point you just made, is that law school teaches you enough to be dangerous and understand the issues to keep yourself out of trouble. You can't deal with them yourself, but you do recognize them, and then you hire proper counsel. For a lot of the international deals that I do involve very complicated tax issues about jurisdiction. And I know the issues, I don't know the answers, and that's when you bring in counsel. But law school does heighten your sense to the issues that you're going to confront.
Great point. Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Darcy Jones. I'm a former Trachtenberg Scholar here. Graduated from the School of Business with a concentration in sports management. And currently I'm working with athletes to kind of embrace the power they have to cut out the media middleman and create their own platforms and take into account to create their own content that they can control and distribute both over linear and nonlinear platforms. I just wanted to ask you, in the future, what kind of relationships do you see between whether it be digital networks, platforms like Uninterrupted, Players Tribune, and things like that, with networks such as ESPN? What kind of forecast in the future? What kind of partnerships do you see as far as distributing content, partnership-wise, or do you see a growth in content shifting to internet and ESPN investing in digital platforms? Just kind of talk about, I guess, I just want to get your future analysis on the way you think that content will be distributed and consumed by consumers.
Interesting question. And the answer is none of us know. Because going forward, every day there seems to be a new technology, right? Every 6 months, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or whatever the technology is today. What I do know, and David is actually more of an expert at this than I am, but what I do know is there are very few athletes and entertainers out there who don't say, you know, I want more control of my name and my likeness. I don't want necessarily a middleman to handle all this. And I think that's dangerous, believe it or not, because I feel, and David, you can back me up on this if you feel, I think the athletes need to focus on being athletes while they're at the prime of their life. And I think entertainers need to focus on being entertainers. And for one of the few times, I don't believe they should be entrepreneurs while they're so immersed in what they're doing. With that said, I realize I didn't answer your question directly. With that said, what you're talking about presents a danger, because people are now tweeting too much, they're taking selfies, and if I was managing an athlete or an entertainer, I want to grab that phone away. So I think, let's get right down to what you're asking. How does this affect you, right? How does this affect you? You've posed a perfectly good business opportunity. How can someone like you provide the athletes with the connectivity to their followers that they want without exposing them to all the issues that they're going to face by tweeting too quickly or sending something out too fast, while simultaneously allowing them to focus on their careers? Yeah. I don't know the answer, but that's the question. That's the question.
Okay. By answering it with the question, you know you're becoming a law professor. Another question.
First, thank you very much for coming. Really enjoyed that speech. One of the big themes was you were talking about sort of a tension between an entrepreneurial spirit of risk-taking and also sort of how sometimes the default as an attorney and a lawyer is to maybe be too risk-averse. And you talked about how that one story where you were at a lunch, the guy was in a great mood, came back and was sour after talking to his lawyer. And a lot of times people look at lawyers as sort of inhibitors. And I was curious about, through your experiences where you've seen lawyers as opportunity creators and sort of the skills they've shaped that relationship to shift that around.
Okay, it's a good question. Well, in defense of lawyers, let me say this. They are paid to protect you. So they will always come across as being deal breakers. And the better they do their job, the more people dislike them. It's their lot in life to tell you everything that can go wrong. And that's just the way it is. People hate on them for that. I understand that. Now, with that said, I have some of the lawyers I use now and many lawyers in the past, after they get done telling you why you shouldn't do something, they then say, but hey, Bill, I can introduce you to so-and-so, and I've got a friend. Or did you think about structuring it this way? They've always got their liability insurance in the back of their mind. Don't worry, that's for sure. But they do, and lawyers today are very, very sensitive to that fact. Nobody wants to be perceived as the deal breaker. So bottom line to your answer is, that stigma will never go away because you are paying them to protect you, and nobody likes to be told what not to do, or what you haven't done, or what you need to do, or what you forgot to do. With that said, most of the lawyers that I deal with today are much more proactive than they have been in the past, and there are plenty of good lawyers out there now.
And a great teaching point in this, and this came forward in my career, even though my career was not one where I was starting companies, but I was always giving advice to individuals who wanted to do something. And what I had in the bottom of my mind was exactly as you were talking about, Bill. I want to keep that person out of trouble. And so I always would give advice to say, well, if you do this, here are some of the consequences. But a very good lawyer always keeps in mind, you want to do as much for your client to help them to reach their objective. And so if you're proactive with that, you can think very creatively, like, you wanted to do it this way, that doesn't quite work. But if you think about this, that might help. It's a wonderful question. I think there's another, yes?
Hey, Mr. Poster, my name's Kevin Delby. Thank you for speaking this morning. You said anyone can become an expert on any topic in 3 days. And I think that that's brilliant. Obviously, with the internet, it's so easy, a million resources. But how do you convince a business partner or an employer that you do have those skills. You know, for instance, when you transitioned into the media industry, your background was in real estate. How did you convince Charlie Sheen or the executives that you understood the different landscape?
Well, good question. And I'm not coming right back at you, but I'm coming right back at you, okay? I said anybody could learn something in a few days, and that's true, but that's just one piece of the puzzle. Just because you become an expert, okay? So when I talked about building those communication systems in Europe earlier, right? So just because I became an expert with the help of some engineers on how to build VSAT systems, that was just one very small component of building a much larger system and fulfilling a need that a client or society has. So you have to back into it, all right? Just because you become an expert in 3 days, that's one piece of the puzzle. You said, well, how do I convince someone to hire me as a media executive? Well, that's great. You have that expertise. But now, how is that expertise going to benefit the partner that you want to partner with or the employer that you want to be an employee of? And that's where the entrepreneurial part comes in. When you're talking about learning about how to be an expert, well, you go to law school and you learn how to be a lawyer. But are you really, truly of any value when you come out of law school? No, you have to then take what everyone else has and develop an expertise and apply it.
Huge. We have a few more minutes.
I've actually, excuse me, I've actually got a question for you. It seems like one of the biggest steps that you've taken is maintaining relationships and making an effort to keep in contact with people no matter what. Looking at our current state of affairs and between LinkedIn, I mean, text messaging, all these different ways to get a hold and keep in contact with people, would you recommend taking different approaches when we come up to, say, a colleague versus someone older that could be a future business opportunity? Do you recommend using email, using calls, using face-to-face, or what's the best method that's worked for you throughout your?
My best method is the most antiquated method, which is the telephone. Because do you know how many times text messages are misinterpreted? You know how many times emails are misinterpreted? It's one man's opinion. You can't get the feel from a text message. You can't get the feel from an email until you've developed a very close relationship with someone. And I've seen too many people, and some of the people I mentioned earlier, athletes and entertainers that I work with, I've seen more friendships destroyed on Facebook than I care to share with you. So in direct response to your question, I think whenever you can establish a phone relationship with someone where you can talk to them, that is the most important relationship you can have. If you want to follow up with text messages for quick little thoughts, that's fine. But emails and text messages should not be your primary source of interaction, in my opinion.
And I want to tell you something. I did not prompt this man to say that, but it is something that I have told students time and time again, is that the interpersonal skills that you need in order to get people to trust you, to believe in you, you can't do that through an email or a text. They want to hear you. They want to be able to perceive, this is a genuine person that I really want to do business with and that I want to have. So one of the things, and it's a big teaching point for our students because many of them rely on technology in order to have their connections, is that you cannot underestimate the value of creating an interpersonal connection with someone. And the best way to do that is for them to hear you and oftentimes see you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think we're out of time, unfortunately, as everything was going forward, but because the questions were so great and everything sort of pitches so forward with regard to what we're doing in legal education, it just means you've got to come back again, Mr. Poster, to do that.
For you, anything.
Oh my God, I even have all these witnesses to hear this. Ladies and gentlemen.
Turn off the cameras.
Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're the best.
Thank you.
You really are.
Great. I enjoyed that.
Fabulous.